All right, guys, are there any questions on the homework assignments so far? Any questions on the homework assignment so far? From Fridays? Number 13. Find the values of x that makes the quadrilateral a parallelogram. So they gave us one of the diagonals was 4x plus 2, and the other diagonal was 5x minus 6. Thank you. So if it's a parallelogram, we know that the diagonals bisect each other. So these two segments are going to have to be congruent. So we can set them equal to each other and then solve for the value of x. So the first thing we can do is subtract 4x from both sides. These here will cancel, giving us 2 is equal to 5x minus 4x is x minus 6. Then the next thing we can do is add 6 to both sides, telling us x is equal to 8. Now we can plug it back in and check. 4 times 8 is 32, plus 2 is 34. 5 times 8 minus 6, well, 5 times 8 is 40, and 40 minus 6 is indeed 34. They both give us the same amount, so that is the correct answer. Any questions on any of this so far? We good with everything so far? Yes? All right. What we're doing today is using properties of special parallelograms. In this lesson, you'll learn about 3 special types of parallelograms: rhombus, rectangle, and squares. It is going to be considered a rhombus if we have 4 congruent sides. We classify a rhombus as a quadrilateral or parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. A rectangle is a parallelogram with 4 right angles. And a square is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides and 4 right angles. So all 3 of these are parallelograms. They're also considered quadrilaterals, obviously, because they have 4 sides. That's all it takes to be a quadrilateral. But if we know that all 4 sides are congruent, then it's not only a quadrilateral, it's also a parallelogram, but more specifically, it's a rhombus. A rectangle has to have 4 sides and 4 right angles. And a square is going to have 4 right angles and 4 congruent sides. So can a square be a rhombus? Can a rhombus be a square? Can a square be a rectangle? Can a rectangle be a square? No. So there are some differences between them, and there is some overlap. And more specifically, whenever we name something, we always name it by the most specific name possible. So if we're told that it just has 4 right angles, the most specific we can name it is a rectangle. If we're told that it just has 4 congruent sides, we're going to name it a rhombus. Now, there are going to be some times it says give all the names. We're going to give them all. But any questions on this so far? I think some of y'all are still writing. be good to move on to the next slide. Yes? Okay. Now, the corollary of this, a quadrilateral is a rhombus if and only if it has what? What do you think? 4 congruent sides. So a quadrilateral is a rhombus if and only if it has 4 congruent sides. Can we say the opposite? Can we say the converse of it? If a quadrilateral has 4 congruent sides, then it is a rhombus? Yeah, it works both ways. But we do need to specify that it is a quadrilateral, because we can't just say a figure with 4 congruent sides is a rhombus. We have to specify that it does have 4 sides. A quadrilateral that has 4 congruent sides, if and only if it is a rhombus. A quadrilateral is a rectangle, if and only if it has 4 right angles. Quadrilateral is a rectangle, if and only if it has 4 right angles. Are we ready for the last one? A quadrilateral is a square if and only if what? It's a rhombus in a square, or a rhombus in a rectangle. But yes, yeah, because if it is a rhombus in a rectangle, rhombus says it has 4 congruent sides, rectangle says it has 4 right angles, so yes. If and only if it has 4 congruent sides and 4 right angles. Or we could call it regular. Because if a polygon is regular, it means all the angles are congruent and all the sides are congruent. So a square is a regular polygon. Questions on this so far? Yes? 7.3? For here? Yeah. 4 right angles. There's a thing covered on one. Yeah. Proof exercise 82 page. I thought I was missing that. No. It's just telling that the proof of that is on that page. Because it's also here too. So, for these first few here, we're going to say always, sometimes, or never. Or always or sometimes true. Decide whether the statement is always or sometimes true. And we'll look through these and see if it is or not. A is congruent to S. So for any rhombus, QRST, can we say, so this here is a rhombus, Q is congruent to S. Would this be always or sometimes true? Why would we say always? I'm not disagreeing. What is a rhombus specifically? What did we say a rhombus is? Rhombus is a what? Is a, what do we know about angles and parallelograms? The opposite angles are congruent. Yeah, the opposite sides are parallel and the opposite angles are congruent. So can we say that Q and S are congruent? Yeah. Is it always true? Yeah, because that's just one of the properties of a parallelogram. But we do know also that all 4 sides are, because it's a rhombus. For any rhombus, QRST, so we know, since it's a rhombus, all 4 sides are congruent. Now the question is Q and R congruent? Sometimes or always? Sometimes. When would it be? When would this be true? Right, and if it is a square, what would the values of Q and R be? Because for these to be congruent, they would have to be exactly 90 degrees. because of the properties of parallelograms, the consecutive angles are 180. They had together be 180. So does this make sense so far? Okay, now we're looking at a rectangle. I provided one on the note sheets for us. Is it sometimes or always true that AB is going to be congruent to BC? Yes. It's going to be when it's a square. Because we know the opposite sides are congruent, but all four sides is going to be only when it's a square. Questions on this here? We ready for the next one? For any rectangle ABCD, decide whether the statement's always or sometimes true. AB, CD. Yes. What do we know about parallelograms? The opposite sides are parallel and congruent. Parallel and congruent. So AB and DC have to be congruent. That's just properties of parallelograms. All sides congruent, if all four sides are congruent, not necessarily. Because we know the opposite angles are congruent, but we can't say they're all the same. If they are all the same, then it's a square. Because all four sides being congruent, if all four sides are congruent, it could be a rhombus, and rhombuses don't necessarily have all the same angle. If it's a rectangle and all four sides are congruent, then it would be all the angles are the same, if that makes sense. For any square, JKLM, is it always or sometimes true that JK and KL are perpendicular? Always. Why do we say always? And if two sides are perpendicular, it means they do what? Meet at a 90-degree angle. And since it is a square, we know all four angles are 90 degrees. They're all four 90-degree angles. So, yes, it ends up being all four sets of sides are perpendicular to each other, respectively. We just can't say that JM and KL are perpendicular, because they're not. Because the opposite sides are parallel. Any other questions on this here? For any rectangle, EFGH, is it always or sometimes true that FG is congruent to GH? Yes. Sometimes it'd have to be a square. You ready for the next one? A quadrilateral has four congruent sides and four congruent angles. Fetch and classify. So what would this be? Four congruent sides and four congruent angles would be a square. Yes. Because a four-sided figure, the sum of the angles would be 360. And if they're all the same, four angles, it'd have to be 90. So the only two four-sided figures that have right angles would be a square and rectangle. Then all four sides would be congruent. It'd have to be a square. Questions on this here? Classify the special quadrilateral. So rhombus. It's not 90, and all four sides are congruent. Yes? A rhombus. So again, with these here, whenever it has to just specify or name the figure, we're always going to go for most specific. Because realistically, what else could we call this? Well, it is a quadrilateral. Because what is a quadrilateral? Four-sided figure. As long as it has four sides, it is a quadrilateral. This is also a parallelogram. Because it is a rhombus is a parallelogram with four congruent sides. Because if it just asks to classify, we want rhombus. We always want the most specific. If, because the homework sheet is going to ask this, it asks you to name all, give all names, then we have to say that it is a quadrilateral parallelogram and it's a rhombus. If it asks for all of them, we would want all of them. If it just asks to classify, we want the most specific. No. Classify the special quadrilateral. It is a parallelogram. It is a rhombus. So it tells us the bottom side and this side are congruent, yes? Now it is a parallelogram, yes. We have two sets of parallel sides, yes? And in all parallelograms, the opposite sides are congruent. Since the bottom one has one mark, it means the top side, we consider it to have one. Since the one on the right has one mark, we can consider the one on the left to have. So all four sides are congruent. Can I say all four angles are congruent? No. Could they be? Could, but again, that only works sometimes. So the most specific name we can give this one is rhombus. But it is still a parallelogram and a quadrilateral. How about number one? Square. Is that it? Parallelogram. Rhombus. A five-sided figure is a pentagon. Because what does poly mean? Because we have polymorphs, we have poly is many. So polygon is a many-sided figure.
So could we technically classify that as a polygon as well?
Yes. Because we won't go that general, but this here is all of them. Because it said state all possible names. Because technically, yes, it would be considered a polygon. Let's look at number two. So guys, we're almost done.
No, the quadrilateral. Rhombus.
How do we know it's a rhombus? What is, by definition, what's a rhombus? Four congruent sides. Does this have four congruent sides? Do we have four congruent sides? Do we know anything else besides the fact that it has four sides? So we can call it a.
It looks like a disform.
So let's look at the next one. Because I think we're almost done, aren't we? I think these are the last two. Or we got four more. So, looking at this here, guys, so number four, what would we classify this? Rectangle. Can't be a square. Can it be a rhombus? What's the definition of rhombus? So it can't be a rhombus. And you can shorten quadrilateral to quad if you want. Number 5, what would it be? Parallelogram, yes. Anything else? Quadrilateral, because it has 4 sides. As long as it has 4 sides, it will be a quadrilateral. It is a parallelogram because we have 2 sets of parallel sides. Is it a rhombus? Is it a rectangle? If it's neither of those, it can't be a square. So that's it. It is a parallelogram.
Wait, it's the same exact shape from the last one.
Yep, it is. Yep, let's do 8. What is 8?
You're discussing this.
Rectangle, because we do have 4 right angles, yes? Can we say it's a rhombus?
No.
No. Rhombus, rhombus has what? Are all 4 sides congruent? No. It is a parallelogram, and it is a quadrilateral. Questions on this here? We ready for the last 2? Number 10. Can we say anything else besides a quadrilateral? No. Number 11. Parallelogram. It is a rhombus. Is that it? Yep. Quadrilateral. Yes. Rhombus has 4 congruent sides. A rectangle has 4 right angles. And a square has both. 4 congruent sides and 4 right angles. Yep. Quadrilateral just means it has 4 sides. Those would be considered polygons, so pentagons and above. But right now we're focused on quadrilaterals. You're welcome.